Good morning, everybody. Today we are covering the definition of freedom according to Spark values. We're going to be talking about an asteroid in the asteroid belt that can absolutely replace all of our nickel mining and discover possibly the core of a lost planet. And last but not least, what is nature economy? Can you get a degree in it, and how does it help our environment? We're going to cover all of that today on The Spark Show. Good morning and welcome. How are you doing? So yes, we've got a great little lesson for you today, and it's more of a sharing, and I'm looking over at our vision document that we have on the wall. We at one point covered Spark values, and we started codifying what are the principles by which Spark and Spark citizens guide themselves as they go through the world, because we like to think now and again that State of the Spark is a non-location nation of individuals living by the same values. And so that raises the question, what values do you live by? What principles do you live by? When you need to make a decision, what's the core rubric going on inside of you? We're going to cover that today. But of course, before that, we've got fun little other news to elevate you and help you become a global citizen. And before that, we've got to share a cup of gratitude with coffee drippings. Grab your warm cup of coffee or tea and share with us in the comments what you're grateful for, and I'll go first. Okay, I just noticed this. Who is this? Hinson says asteroids are actually baseballs thrown by aliens to Earth. And yes, there is one asteroid that flew through our solar system that some scientists in Harvard think came from aliens. This particular baseball thrown in space was considered iron and nickel, and we're going to cover that in a second. So, warm cup of gratitude. What are you grateful for? Tell us in the comments how you're going to start your day with a heart full of gratitude. Man, I've got a heart full of gratitude this morning. Several things. Number one, we had an awesome dinner with very close friends last night and new friends. Making new friends at the dinner table at Dory Joseph's birthday. It was just awesome to celebrate one of our close friends, people that we know that we're investing with, people that we know we're building business with. But those really are just external signs that we're doing life together with people. And then Emerson, who's dropped in on the show once or twice in the past, swung by. He actually is a co-owner of the restaurant we were at, as well as the lead at the bar. And he swung by and gave me a hug, and he said, man, I love your morning show. He said, whenever I can, I pop in and listen to the show while I'm driving. I don't watch, I listen. And it was just, I was so grateful that whether that happens all the time or just once in a blue moon, it meant a lot to me that the time we've spent here together ourselves, that the time we've spent with people like Emerson, that I still get surprise drop-ins. People say, hey, no, I listened to the show and it moved me like this, or I learned that. So that is what I'm grateful for, the feedback loop, that you're making an impact in the world. Everyone loves that, right? Everyone loves that, and it does stroke the ego. But more than anything, it fills you up to let you know, hey, keep going, because you're making an impact in other people's lives. And the other thing I'm grateful for, crazy hair day. Yeah, we're going to go get a haircut today, so don't give me no crap about how crazy and up my hair is. It's just a hot mess. We're going to go get it chopped today. That's what I'm grateful for. What are you grateful for this morning? It's Wednesday. Tell me what you're grateful for in the comments, and let's talk about other news that makes you smart. Here we go. In other news, number one, natural capital accounting might give us another method to put an economic voice on nature. No, we're not looking to put a price on nature so we can sell it per se. You see, a lot of times of the work that Marissa and I have done in international humanitarian work, in my own travels in my 20s, I was studying international business and traveling the world. And one of the things that often came up was the negative environmental impact of industry. And though we were studying international business, they kept saying, look at the waste, look at the throw off. Do we even want capitalism because of how it's wrecking our environment? And the topic came up quite a bit. We wish that nature could be taken account for in economics, because people will not respect something they cannot measure financially. And though that is tragic, it's also true. Though it's a very sad statement, for the influencers in the world who can make a positive impact in our nature, they just will not pay attention to it unless it has an economic value. And unless they can put derivatives on that economic value. A case in point is once they launched the carbon tax credit, companies had a commodity. They had a way to actually kind of have a dog whistle, if you will, to pay homage to the environment and economy by purchasing carbon tax credits. And those carbon tax credits could then get invested in protecting and preserving nature and the environment. And so it has made a large impact, carbon tax credits, and the successes of that made its way to the UN. The UN has proposed putting a dollar amount on nature. They're calling it the System of Environmental Economic Accounting, ecosystem accounting. And what you'll see in the next 5 or 10 years is you'll start to see degrees coming out, accounting degrees come out, who specialize in assessing and valuing and accounting for. So there's the valuation side, but then there's when you make your annual reports on GDP as a country, you'll also have to make an annual report. If you're part of the UN, you'll have to make your annual report on your economic accounting. How did we manage our ecology? Do we have more birds? Do we have more green spaces? Did the quality of our air go up or down? How many days of smog versus how many days of clear air did we have? And a company can be rewarded, chided, sanctioned based on how they're treating a natural resource. So the UN is proposing it. I don't know if it's passed for all UN members yet, but we'll have to check that out. One of the quotes was, "Our dependence on nature must be acknowledged. We must be recognized. It must be captured and accounted for, because if we can account for it, we can know if it's going up or down." And it accounts for the ability for a country to provide for itself, to provide food, air, and water, not necessarily shelter. That's a whole other category. That's like GDP, right? We're talking about food, air, and water for the human species, and ultimately how we provide for ourselves. So they want to make more informed decisions. And this has actually been done slightly. It started in 2014 when Sweden turned to its own carbon tax policy. So here's a link if you care to read more about nature or ecosystem accounting. How to account for your ecosystems. Is it healthy? And are you contributing in a positive way to your ecology? And are you going to be sanctioned as a country for abusing your ecology? So that's the first piece of other news. Hopefully you're smarter. You can talk about that at the water cooler. Now let's talk about the asteroid known as Psyche. Yes, NASA is finally in the final stretch, I guess. Finally, is in the final stretch of launching its mission to the asteroid known as Psyche. The final assembly is occurring of the spacecraft. The spacecraft is also known as Psyche. So over the next year, they're going to actually be prepared to launch Psyche. Roughly in August 2022, about a year from now, they're in the final stretch of assembling the Psyche spacecraft. Now, where the Psyche asteroid is in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. And some theories believe that this large asteroid full of iron and nickel, for those who don't know, Earth's core is made up of largely iron and nickel. And it's a large enough asteroid that they're wondering that maybe there was a planet that exploded or was wrecked by some other asteroid or by planet collision, and the core was thrust into space and cooled over time. So it's a metal-rich asteroid, and for quite some time, especially if you follow Peter Diamandis and the X Prize, they're trying to encourage asteroid mining so that we can take some of the precious metal mining that we need in our modern society off-world. If we can take it off-world, off-gassing actually occurs in the vacuum of space, not harming any human conditions and not causing any suffering of any known species. And they're looking at actually sending the Psyche spacecraft. It's actually already been 10 years in development, even though we're just now talking about this over the last year. The Psyche Spacecraft has actually been on a process for about the last 10 years, and it's about the size of a VW bus. It's going to get loaded into the space shuttle in August 2022 and launch from Cape Canaveral. And then it's going to be on a multi-year journey. Around May 2023, it's going to do a flyby of Mars and do a gravity assist to slingshot it towards towards Psyche, the asteroid's orbit. And then roughly in early 2026, we'll probably revisit this topic because that's roughly when it will go into orbit around the asteroid Psyche and spend the following 21 months gathering data. If you nerd out like I do, there's a very comprehensive article right here about the development of the spacecraft, its mission, and how they're going to get it to Psyche. And this could significantly benefit us because if we can actually pioneer asteroid mining, and with robotics and AI, we can actually have, like a lot of sci-fi features humans mining asteroids. And though that might be part of our future, it's more likely that we pioneer artificial intelligence and robotics to automate the mining of these asteroids, which are far enough away that it could be years, and the communication between Earth and our robots that will be mining asteroids and mining other planets. The communication is delayed, so these have to be automated to a large degree. So we're probably going to have robot mining long before we ever set a human foot on some of these locations. So you've got the article there. That's your bit of other news. Get a little smarter this morning. Now let's talk about how Spark chooses to look at and focus on freedom as a core value. I've got Lady Grey tea this morning. What are you drinking? I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What a warm cup of gratitude are you drinking this morning? I'm drinking Lady Grey Earl Grey tea. Fantastic tea. It's my favorite tea. Going a little light because I know I'm going to have plenty of coffee later. We know that's coming. So let's talk about this real quick. Let's talk about freedom. One of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King Jr. is this: injustice anywhere, you've heard this, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects us all indirectly. And I believe this came from his letter in a Birmingham jail. For the historians, if I'm mistaken, feel free to correct me there. And I love this quote, and especially this quote. We know the context. It was Martin Luther King was largely talking about racism, but people, if you've read Martin Luther King, he often talked more about poverty first and racism by proxy. He talked about oppression and poverty far more than he talked about racism, especially in a lot of his writings. And he was a brilliant communicator on the plight of the poor. It also correlated naturally at the time that race also interplayed. Now, we know, though, that Martin Luther King was largely focused on external injustice. And that is important to note. External injustices need to be dealt with because, as he said, external oppression and injustice to anyone directly is an injustice to us all. And we can understand that. Philosophically, we get that. But it is only true because it is first and foremost true of internal injustice, the injustice we do to ourselves, the injustice we project onto other people, the injustice that goes on in our heart. You see, you can break the bonds of injustice in a place or in a society, but the oppressor and the person who has oppression in their heart and injustice that they choose or desire to impose upon others, they can simply move to another society. It's not until you root out the heart of injustice that you actually begin to make permanent change in people. And this is what Martin Luther King was getting at as it comes to freedom. But developed societies have used the term freedom a little too freely. Now, hang on. Brittany joins us this morning. Boom. Brittany jumps in and says, I got a cup of coffee with collagen peptides, coffee creamer in her morning cup of gratitude. And that sounds like someone is very near to keto this morning. Grateful for her now 6-year-old daughter, Parker, and the spunk and attitude that she brings to the family that is uniquely her. Man, they were over the other night and we were talking, and we all had to take pause and note that lovely Bethany, kind, sweet, sweet Bethany, was plunged and playing with her sister, plunged under a pillow, and Parker was throwing an elbow on this pillow and just landed like she was a WWF wrestler, and Bethany was playing along perfectly sweet and fine. Those girls, man, they're awesome. That's too funny. Well, thank you for sharing what you're grateful for this morning, Brittany. So when we talk about injustice and we talk about freedoms, two sides of a similar coin, we're often talking about external freedoms and justices. And I do believe what's worse than all this is that societies, especially developed countries, have used the term freedom just a bit too freely. We throw this term around as if America owns this term, or the developed world, or the English-speaking world owns this term, freedom. You might be shocked to know that 7 out of 10 of the countries rated the most happiest in the world, 7 out of 10 of them are what Americans would consider socialist countries. Finland, Sweden, Norway, Iceland. Here, let me drop this link to you so that you know I'm not making these statistics up. No. 7 out of 10 of these countries that Americans have been told are socialist or have been raised to believe are socialist are the happiest, or some of the happiest countries, and they have social tendencies. Now, if you research them, it might upset your apple cart a little bit, because we come to find out that if you research Finland, it's not a socialist country. It considers itself a social democracy. It's called the Nordic model. You can look it up. But a lot of these countries have what Americans believe are less freedoms. They're socialist. Let's not be like these countries. And I'm not proposing that America become socialist. I'm proposing that when you think about freedom, you start to expand your definition of freedom. What is freedom not? Freedom is not Americanism. Freedom is not patriotism. I want to challenge your thinking on freedom this morning, that freedom is not pure capitalism necessarily. When you actually interpret the Finnish word for freedom, as I was wont to do this morning, as I was exploring this topic for myself, one of the things I was studying is that they have the freedom of assembly. They have the freedom of economic commerce. They have the freedom of religion, and a slew of any other freedom that we would look in our Constitution and see, this country really values freedom too. And a lot of the countries that we think are socialist economically or socialist governmentally, which is kind of a paradox in terms if you actually study the definition, these countries actually express freedom, and there is a correlation that should be noted. 7 out of 10 of them are some of the happiest. So as Spark and State of the Spark, a non-location nation of its own, was seeking to understand what is freedom. Because if we did a gut check, most people who are experiencing suffering, most people who are experiencing internal suffering, their own suffering, the suffering they impose upon themselves, or external suffering, they're suffering economically, it's hard to get a job, it's hard to break out of the loopholes of the system, any kind of suffering. When they dream of getting out from underneath that suffering, we call it freedom. And when State of the Spark was thinking about what are we trying to do by igniting lives of explosive significance, how do we want to define this core value of what we call freedom? We knew it wasn't just Americanism. We knew it wasn't just capitalism or patriotism. We knew it was the human quality that existed long before the United States, long before the West, long before Canada. As long as there have been humans, they have sought this feeling, this concept called freedom. So in terms of Spark's principles, we have defined it in two ways, internal and external. Internally, freedom is the ability to choose your attitude in every situation. Yes, we pulled this modern definition from Viktor Frankl's work, Man's Search for Meaning. I recommend you read it. This is the story. If you don't know this, Viktor Frankl was in a Nazi concentration camp, and when he was naked and abused and had already known that he lost everyone in his family, I believe except his sister, He even had to tragically, no, I'm not going to bore you with this in the morning because it's kind of a heavy topic of some of the injustices and indignities that he suffered. But he came out of it, or not even came out of it. He endured it at one moment when he realized his Nazi captors were physically abusing him. And in the middle of this moment, he realized, oh, you might take my life. You might cripple me. But what you'll never take is my ability, my freedom to choose to not hate you. My freedom to choose a higher way, my freedom to choose my attitude, my freedom to guide my own mind, my freedom to pity you because you are trapped in a way that I am not. You can't, as a Nazi captor, choose any way out of this. You are oppressed by your perceptions, and I am not. And Viktor Frankl, the founder of logotherapy, I recommend you look it up. It's one of my favorite avenues of psychology, not just because of his book, but because of its usefulness and its utility. It is one of the most powerful psychotherapy or psychological paths there are. So internally first, based on Sparks' definition of freedom, freedom is the ability to choose your attitude in every situation. That's number one. And number two, internally, freedom is accepting your duty to make your situation better. Now stick with me there. Spark defines that freedom is twofold. It's internal and external. We're focused on the internal. It is an internal component to accept your duty, to accept joyfully, happily, that you have a duty to make your situation better. That process is internal freedom. We haven't even gotten into external freedom yet. It's the acceptance. Internal freedom is accepting some realities. And one of those is that you have a duty as a citizen of this planet to make your situation better. I think it was, I forget the guy that wrote The Thousandth Man, Rudyard Kipling, who was conscripted to be at war. And he was at war, I believe, in the Northern Sahara. And some of his co-infantrymen observed him one day planting flowers that he knew would not take root and grow. He found some flowers and started planting and pouring water on them and watered them until they died in Northern Sahara Desert. He did this. And they asked him, why did you do this? And he said, wherever you're at, plant a garden. Wherever you're at, it's on you to make your situation better. The man had freedom. He was conscripted to go to war, to attack and harm people he had no beef with whatsoever. And he decided to plant a garden. This is Sparks' definition of internal definition of freedom, the ability to choose your attitude in every situation and accepting your duty as a human citizen to make your situation better. Externally, freedom is this. First, external freedom is location freedom. And though many have dreamed of this for many years, COVID and our technology converged to create a global location freedom. Basically, COVID over the last year has deposited from the spiritual, manifested in the actual location freedom if you can access it. Now, there are a lot of people who are experiencing poverty where they don't have access to the internet. They can't make money online. I get that. And it's part of my personal mission to bring the internet and free resources to the world to help them prosper. But many of us, most of us, the architecture and the infrastructure of our society has location freedom. The reason we think location freedom comes first of external freedoms. Remember, you can't have external freedom if you don't have internal freedom. So we talked about the internal freedoms first. From there, you can have location freedom. If you can have location freedom and you're not under the oppressive eye of your employer, the oppressive eye of your clients, if we can have location freedom in serving our people, we can then start to govern our time and manage our time to get more efficient and have a better output within less amounts of time. So if you can have location freedom, you can govern your hours, and in governing your hours, you can experience the second external freedom, and that's time freedom. Once you create time freedom, you have cushion of time, and how you invest that time is critical to the third external freedom, which is financial freedom. Everyone talks about financial freedom. Financial freedom isn't having $1 million in the bank. It's what it can get you. If you can have the net cash flow of having $1 million in the bank. So $1 million a bank, 3% interest, right, is about 30 grand a year of just interest. If you can have a net cash flow of 30 grand a year, you are what we call an effective millionaire. Now, you might have other financial goals, I get it, but we try to categorize the external freedoms as location freedom, time freedom, financial freedom. Now, you might not invest in those things. If you can create location freedom and time freedom, you might not invest in creating financial freedom. In Marissa's world, she might create natural freedom. She might create some time freedom, and what she does with that remainder time is go into the woods. I might go surfing and do fitness freedom. But we call it financial freedom, and I could probably spin that word to be economic freedom. And economic, the word, the etymology of the word economics comes from stewardship, how you steward yourself, how you govern your own household and the household of your individual person. So maybe I'll change that from being financial freedom to economic, a koinonomia freedom. So how does Spark define freedom? Internal and external. Internal freedom always comes first. You cannot have external freedom truly and sustainably if you do not first have internal freedom. Internal freedom is the ability to choose your attitude in every situation and accepting your duty as a human citizen to make your situation better. And external freedom is location freedom first, and that gives you the margin to have time freedom, which gives you the margin to have economic freedom. That's how we at Spark define freedom, and it is a right that everyone not only can access and should be allowed to access. Every human has the ability to access internal freedom. I'm thinking of some people with mental disorders. Most every human can already access internal freedoms. And it's up to us who can to put our internal freedoms to use to execute the other Spark values, which we'll cover another day. But I hope this has been helpful to you as a framework. This is the Spark Freedom Framework and how we define freedom, because all the freedom frameworks that come out of this, especially the Spark Core Freedom Frameworks, are built on the values first. And this is just this is the core value. And from here, we'll share some of our other core values like team and growth and community and openness. We'll cover that some other day. But we've got it codified. Listen. If you need any help out there, visit us at stateofthespark.com. If you want to just talk about things like Adrian Smude just jumped on the Facebook Goals and Gratitude group yesterday, and we started talking about investing in mobile homes. He's an mobile home investor, and he just started to ask questions. So we have investors in the group, and we started discussing how he could start sourcing more deals. That's the sort of thing you can get at the Facebook Goals and Gratitude group. Or if you want to talk about our core values and how we plan on elevating the world as a team, as a nation, as a Spark Nation, go and join us at the Facebook Goals and Gratitude group to get more information on that. But no matter what you do today, folks, remember the mission: igniting lives of explosive significance, starting with your own.